Hi, I'm Jean Junior Mayala, and this is my ILM Level 3 Certificate in Effective Management VRQ. This is optional unit 3.36, Leading a Team Effectively. Today I'll be discussing how I took forward the Building Company Values project, which was carried out this year. The vision and strategy around the project was to build AXA Assistance values. Currently, AXA Assistance as a group uses the AXA group values, which are professionalism, innovation, pragmatism, team spirit, and integrity. The aim was to go around to each of the units and each of the countries that AXA Assistance currently is resident in, and help the teams to build their own values by incorporating how they feel, what they think, and how they feel about working for AXA Assistance. From there, the next stage was to build a set of values and send them off to AXA Assistance Group, who were then to collate them, and then the next stage of the project, which is imminent at the moment, and which we're currently waiting on. So, the vision of the project was to take the values that AXA Assistance currently uses and find what their employees think and feel, and therefore help them to build their own values. The importance of kind of this vision and this strategy is to enable and to empower the employees that work for AXA Assistance, to help them take ownership of the company that they work for, and therein make them more productive and more willing to go above and beyond, because their thoughts and their feelings and their values are incorporated in how the company works. How this was translated into objectives for the team, when it came to myself, the communications team, everyone in communications globally was tasked with running workshops in their units or in their countries, and from there they effectively had to come up with 3 values that were the core aspect of what the employees in their unit thought and felt. And from there, they were collated, they were decided on through company briefing, through voting polls, whichever manner or way the communication manager felt they needed to do it in their specific unit. And then from there, the end results were to be sent over to Paris. So, how this was translated into objectives was that there were set deadlines in terms of when the workshops needed to be completed. On my side of things, it was set into my objectives that I needed to make sure that the first workshop was run by the 22nd of March, purely and simply because of the fact that Easter fell after that, and we needed to make sure that the project got the backing that it needed from the execcom and other members of the leadership group, and we were able to do that more effectively prior to the Easter break, effectively. So what then happened after the first initial workshop was there was a secondary workshop to get more views and more thoughts from people, as we're working with around 450 to 500 people at AXA Assistance in Red Hill, and that covers AXA Assistance UK and also AXA Travel Insurance. And then on top of that as well, workshops need to be carried out in Dublin, where the AXA Travel Insurance finance team are based, and then also AXA Assistance Ireland in Athlone, where the other parts of AXA Assistance UK and Ireland are based. So how I went about organising this project was to first of all read through all the material that was sent through from group. From there I was able to dissect and find out exactly what I needed to do in terms of building, and also thinking about the strategy and how to create these workshops and make sure that they worked effectively. And then from there, it was a case of how to duplicate that and still keep the energy and still keep it interesting. So, effectively, what we first did was once group sent us through the information, I created a communications and marketing campaign around the topic and around the subject to gain people's interest. There were banners for the intranet, there were posters, there were drafts of communications to go out to all employees, both AXA Assistance UK and Ireland, but also AXA Travel Insurance UK and also the Ireland team. Following on from this, there was a lot of face-to-face contact with managers and effectively getting them to be more involved in allocating a member of their team to come along to the workshop, as necessarily we didn't need every single employee in the company, but having a view from every team was the most effective way to gain the values and the views and make them more realistic. So from there, once the team had been decided, it was a case of contacting them and arranging the workshop timetables and finding out when they're available. And there was a lot of kind of time management aspects involved in that, making sure that people were told in advance in terms of the workshop, booking rooms, organising the equipment, and also making sure that I knew the material. I had to go through the presentation a few times, make notes, also ran the presentation on my own, just going through it to make sure that I knew the material and I was comfortable with talking about it. And there it was I had to ensure that my timekeeping was spot on, because the fact is I had other projects due at the time as well. I had Voices, which is the internal communication, the internal employee magazine, which was due around the same time as well. So it was a case of time managing and also kind of multitasking to allow myself to get all the work done, but also to make sure that the workshops hit their deadline, ran effectively, and they engaged people to make sure that they were able to feel like they participated in something that was a lot bigger than their standard role. So, in terms of working alongside the team, each of the workshops, there were around 8 to 15 employees that attended. They were effectively my team. So what I did was break them up into individual groups and get them brainstorming, firstly on their own, and in terms of that I had really short deadlines. There was 15-minute sessions, 15-minute periods to enable them to come up with some ideas and some words, some values, some thoughts and feelings that they felt were in keeping with the AXA Assistance values. And then from there, it was a case of putting them all together and then breaking up the groups again to make sure that there were no individuals who effectively were taking over. And to help with that aspect, I made sure that when people entered the room, everyone was on equal peggings. There were managers, there were contact centre workers as well, but there were also supervisors and team leaders and so forth. So there were several different levels of employees, all based in the workshop. But to help with that as well, I made sure that it was generally somebody from the contact centre, somebody who had direct links with our customers, but also was part of a team that led each individual group. So, in terms of the feedback that I received from running this project, a lot of feedback came back, and I have evidence of that as well, was that it was something different. It was something that employees hadn't done before. It was allowing them to take ownership of something that effectively they didn't think they had before. It was an opportunity for them to voice their opinions, but also tell us what they thought about the company. The thoughts, their feelings, and the values that they came out with were to be translated and sent off to group. So in terms of that, it gave people the opportunity to really express themselves, which they felt was very, very important. So in terms of a specific situation where I had to show leadership, when it came to the workshops, we requested a member of the execcom and the leadership group to attend and to help facilitate the whole situation. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, the first workshop, the leadership group member unfortunately had to leave quite early. So effectively, I had to take over the session, which I was already managing and running anyway, but they've been delegated to do the introduction and do some of the connecting parts due to the fact that due to the seniority of their level at the company. Due to the fact that they were unable to kind of complete the task, I effectively had to step in, which meant managing the groups at an earlier stage than I expected to. So from there, I basically took over, made sure that while I was talking, I was interacting with the teams. I led them through the first two projects, which effectively the leadership person was supposed to do, which was putting them each into kind of letting them settle down on the as individuals and to brainstorm some ideas on their own. This was a little bit difficult, as what we wanted to do was effectively have a silent period where people were reflective about their position and how they felt about working for AXA Assistance. What happened was, as it does in groups, people had a tendency of talking. So effectively I had to take control and get them to essentially focus on the task at hand, because the next stage involved them talking and interacting and getting very kind of vocal and involved. And I needed them to, just for that 10 minutes, to focus on themselves, because once they focus on themselves, they would be able to bring something to the group, which I felt that actually if they didn't do that at the beginning, it wouldn't be as effective later on, because what happens in group, and you notice in group dynamics, is somebody takes over. There's always somebody who's either a natural leader, somebody who is effectively more assertive than others, and they have a tendency of taking over. What I wanted to do was make sure that by giving them that silent period and giving them that time to sit down and be reflective on their own, they will be able to contribute something to the team. And even if there was somebody that was a little bit more confident in the team and a little bit more vocal, they would still be able to voice their opinion, even if it was just by handing the post-it note over and somebody else reading out their choice of values. So in terms of that, it was very much a case of mediating, but also walking around the room and making sure that actually no one person took over. Noticing when somebody was quiet for a while, jumping in and helping certain groups that had either run out of steam or weren't quite sure where they were going, and just give them the motivation and the drive to carry on with what they were doing, and to make sure that they actually did follow through. And it all kind of went back to aspects of kind of Maslow's hierarchy when it came to that aspect, and the needs that people have, and sometimes they don't express them, and it was a case of actually making sure that as a manager and managing the project and the processes, that I was very empathetic to their needs and walked around and made sure that actually if somebody looked frustrated, somebody didn't look happy, it was very much questioning that and finding out what was wrong. And sometimes it was something as simple as, oh, I'm not quite sure what I should be doing, or it could be something as complicated as, actually, this is my view, and fair enough, it may have been a negative one, and it was a case of having to give that a positive spin, because even negative values and negative views should be incorporated because they help people to push themselves. So that was that aspect. So my natural leadership style is to be very affiliative and coaching. So this project was perfect for me in terms of my natural ability to want to teach, to want to help people, and to want to help people to develop as individuals. So I was quite lucky in terms of this project because it was a workshop and it was something that I knew lots about. I'm very much an advocate of values, especially when it comes to company values, because I am a believer that you should enjoy your job and you should like where you work. And if you don't, then you need to express that to individuals who can help you to develop and effectively enjoy where you work and enjoy what you do. So, and in terms of that as well, my influencing style is very much a collaborative one. So this allowed me to work with other people, work in a short time period, but actually it was a constant collaboration. It was mixing, taking ideas from somewhere else, developing ideas, and very much taking that forward and really seeing what could happen. In terms of leadership style, I think this was probably the best. My natural style was the best one to go in with, as there were elements of the pacemaker that came out, and that was due to the fact that actually we did need to set a standard pace when it came to the workshop. It was very much kind of 10-15 minute slots for each of the activities. So pacing and making sure that targets were reached and we had enough values and so forth, and making sure that the teams were working at a certain pace was very important. But the most important aspect of this was to help them to be able to vocalize, which meant that I had to be very affiliative and had to be coaching, and that was not just in terms of coaching them and talking to them on a one-to-one basis, but coaching ideas out of them and coaching them to develop their ideas. And from that, I think it helped to develop my performance because I very much take on the role and I develop better when people engage with me. And because during the workshops people were able to engage me and it was an interactive element, I felt that I came very much into my own, and it was fun, it was interesting, and I wasn't bored, and I made sure that other people weren't bored, and I continued the high spirit element and making sure that there was a high energy aspect, and it was very much kind of learning in a group, and I think from the feedback we received, I think the employees who were involved were very, very appreciative of what they were able to do, and it allowed them to feel needed, and it allowed them to build their esteem levels, and kind of it was very much about kind of self-actualization, because the fact was they volunteered or they'd been volunteered by their manager, but they'd come along and they were actually taking a part of themselves and a part of how they felt about working for Axis Assistance and putting that on paper, and that, going back into Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that filled some of those need aspects. It was the self-actualization aspect, the esteem needs, which allowed them to actually grow and allowed them to be excited about something. And when people get excited and they feel like they're being listened to and they're involved, it builds their self-esteem, because it gives them power, it gives them ownership, and that's so important. But at the same time as well, working as a group, it filled that social need. It meant that they could actually collaborate with other people, and a lot of the employees or access assistants can work in silos. They're on their phone, they're dealing with customers on a one-to-one basis, so they don't always get to interact with their colleagues unless they are asking a question. So this allowed them to actually interact socially, but on a different level, which is so important. And just the fact that it was able to fill some of those needs meant that it was able to fill some of those basic needs that people need. And in terms of that, there was lunch, there were teas, there were coffees and so forth. So all those basic aspects. So filling those basic aspects, giving them food, giving them drink, allowing them to be relaxed, allowing them to let their feelings and their thoughts come out, hit the other needs that were so important and were needed. In terms of specific examples of actions that were taken, in terms of motivating the team, it was very much a humour aspect. It was breaking the ice, getting them to laugh and joke about things, but also reminding them that they were in a safe environment. And not just in terms of Maslow's hierarchy need being actually safe, but actually being mentally safe, allowing them to know that their thoughts and their feelings were valid and that nothing they said in the room would be held against them, because that's always important when making sure to help people to be able to actually express themselves effectively. So in terms of that, there was very much the motivational tool that I used was humour. It was making them laugh, it was getting them involved, it was high energy. I used a lot of my own personality and just put myself out there. And when I did a lot, I got a lot back from employees. They were able to talk to me about stuff that necessarily they wouldn't talk to your managers, but they were able to do it in a safe environment, and from there they were able to build the values that they felt reflected how they feel and what they thought, which is so important. So the agreed goals were around the fact that we needed to have three final values from each of the workshops. And to help them to get to that, it was very much a case of the initial values that they thought of individually, breaking them into a group, and then from a group they were supposed to come up with 6 values that they felt were effective, and then from there they were supposed to discuss those 6 values and bring them down to 3. So effectively in the first workshop there were 4 groups, and each of those 4 groups came up with 3 values each. So in the end we had 12 values that came up, and from there we were able to take those to company briefing and get all the employees to vote on the top 3, which was really interesting, and it allowed not just the people in the not just the employees in the workshop who had taken ownership of that and been able to develop those values, but it also meant that the employees were able to vote on the values, and having 12 kind of potential values meant that it catered for a lot of people, and they were able to actually choose something that was really close to what they actually felt. And from the feedback that we got, people actually felt like, you know what, you have listened to us, you have engaged with us, and I managed that process, and I'm very proud of the fact I did. In terms of individual members of the team, there were 2 employees who were contact centre employees, and they were very much a lot shyer and a lot quieter than the other people in the workshops. And this was due to the fact they were relatively new, but also they didn't feel that their opinion mattered. And to help them with that, it was very much a case of actually sitting down with them while everyone else was doing the workshops and getting their point of view. And the point of view that came across from them was, why am I here? Do I really matter? And I had to explain to them that actually they did matter, and it was important for them to be involved and to get involved and to pass on their views. And from that, it was very much the motivational aspect was sitting them down and talking to them, helping them to engage, but also it was a lot about kind of resilience training. It was using the hot cross method, which was the kind of the situation, their thoughts, finding out their feelings, what that reacted to, what that related to, and then how that made them feel, and so forth. So it was going round in a circle and effectively taking them out of that negative spiral or the quiet spiral they were in, and giving them a positive spin and giving them a positive force and something positive to think about and to focus their attention on. And then from there, it was very much bringing them back into the group and introducing them to the group again. So it was a case of when I'd sat down with them and spoken to them and effectively tried to motivate them into thinking about the project in the most positive manner, I reintroduced them to the group, but also gave them a voice. So I effectively started off the conversation. So it was very much bringing them in and saying, oh, while I was sitting down with said person, they said this. What do you guys think about this idea? And from there, they were able to step in, and when people were asking them questions, they took over, which allowed me to step back and go and work with another group, which was really important for them. And it actually meant that that person, in the end, their value was one of the final ones chosen by all the employees of AXA Assistance UK. And they're very proud of that, because initially they didn't think that their value was important. It had a bit of a negative connotation, but actually when we sat down and thought about it, we were able to create something that was actually a positive value from the kind of the thoughts and feelings that they'd at first thought were negative ones. So this is the end of essentially my video report. I will be uploading all the evidence surrounding this as well. Thank you very much for your time. My name is Sean Junior Mayala.